Good afternoon. Welcome to Cabinet on Tuesday, 9th of August 2022. It's 3 p.m. and welcome all members. Membership of the Cabinet. I've got apologies from Councillor Viv Kendrick, Councillor Carol Patterson, Councillor Will Simpson and Councillor Naheed Mather. Everybody else is here. Okay. Minutes of previous meeting, 5th of July 2022, are they correct record? Thank you very much, members. Any declaration of interest, please complete the form and hand it into the committee clerk at the end of the meeting. Item 4, admission of the public. Any public? No. Right, no public. Any deputations or petitions? Any members? No. Questions by members of the public? We haven't got any questions from the public because there aren't any. Question by elected members? Okay. Councillor Lawson and then Councillor Cooper. Have we got anybody else?
Thank you, Leader. At the last Cabinet meeting, I asked you what direct actions you had taken in light of the cost of living crisis motion at Council the previous week. Can I ask again, what personal actions have you taken to lobby government to improve prospects of residents in Kirklees?
Yeah, I think one of the things I said was we did have a meeting at the LGA a few days before the last meeting of the Cabinet. I did say that Greg Clark was there and we did actually have a direct conversation with him. One of the things what we also said was at the moment, right, yeah, we don't have a functioning government. I'm being very careful because obviously we have a new leader, a new Prime Minister sometime in October. But one of the things that we're doing is we're actually continuously making sure that we actually are lobbying government regularly. But when I do go down to the LGA, we on a cross-party basis are actually making the government realise, right, yeah, that the cost of living crisis is something that's a waiting time bomb, financial waiting time bomb. And they need to start the process now. One of the things that we're pressing nationally, for example, is renegotiate the oil and gas prices and the fuel prices. But what I'll do is I'll ask you if there's anything else my Cabinet portfolio holder wants to add regarding the cost of living crisis. I think it's a broken record. We're doing what we can, but is there anything new that you want to add?
I don't think there's anything new from the last time, apart from probably, and I think I mentioned this last time, that we will be extending the service that we partner with the bread and butter thing in terms of affordable food, and certainly we're continuing to keep the emphasis around distributing the £150 rebate. That's now we're at about 130,000 households that's been distributed to, and certainly we'll make sure that's provided to everybody that should have it by the end of September. And in addition, don't forget we do have the discretionary grant that was given to us by government with regards to the energy rebate scheme. We're working on that at the moment. Some of that is being distributed currently to those in the bands outside of the original bands, where we've identified that they're vulnerable or they have needs, and basically the first way of doing that is if they have a council tax reduction. So that's what we're looking at first of all. So not great differences in that regard, but continued emphasis on what we were doing.
Thank you, Councillor Paul Davies. Supplementary?
Yeah. Thank you, Leader. You use an interesting word there, and I agree. It's time bomb. The clock is ticking, and we are losing weeks as we go by. You say there is no functioning government. That's true. However, that shouldn't really stop us from lobbying and petitioning Mr. Clark in the strongest possible terms. You're in a unique position, representing nearly 500,000 people in Kirklees. Will you be writing to Mr. Clark and asking for him to petition to scrap the price energy increase this coming autumn?
Yeah, you're probably also aware that the previous Prime Minister, Labour Prime Minister, Gordon Brown, has actually gone on the record very recently around putting pressure on the government to bring an emergency budget. That is something that we will be pushing, and that'll be something that this administration will be fully supporting, and we've already done that. At the same time, what we've called on is COBRA to meet on a weekly basis. COBRA is the government's emergency committee that was meeting during the pandemic, and there's been other crises similar where they met, because what we can't afford to do is not do anything. And one of the things that we actually are pressing hard on is to make sure that the officials start to renegotiate the price hike that we've seen in energy. I'll be down at the LGA again very shortly, and together we'll be lobbying at the LGA to make sure that they put measures in place, because come October, November, when the weather gets colder, it's not just going to have an impact on pensioners, it's also going to have an impact on children, it's also going to have an impact on families, and already charities are actually stretched in terms of just, you're not talking about food, you're talking about basic stuff like duvets, blankets, and stuff to keep warm. And if you read Gordon Brown's commentary, and I'm sure we've also seen this in our own wards and our own areas, that Gordon Brown, what he said was, in Fife, where he knows the area quite well, he hasn't seen the level of poverty and deprivation and people struggling just to basically live in a lifetime. And he's saying that things need to happen very, very quickly, and we will continue to do that. And whatever I can do as leader of this administration, I will do, and I'll fully take on board what you said, Councillor Lawson. Thank you, Councillor Cooper.
But it can't see back to the time I first raised with Kirklees Highways the issue of HGVs going through Armitage Bridge. It's been years now that I've raised this issue, and they have prevaricated, they have taken a heck of a lot of time, and they've not done anything about it, really, I would like to see some action on it.
Thanks,
it's been incredibly frustrating.
Thanks, Councillor Cooper. My apologies if no one got back in touch with you, but what I will do is Naheed's not here, she's actually not well today, but I'll make sure Naheed looks into that and gets back to you, if that's okay. Supplementary? Right, I'll make sure that happens. Any more questions from members of the public? Sorry, members of the council. Councillor John Lawson, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Brief question. May take a legal answer, I don't know. Recently we had coming to groups visits from officers talking about the climate change action plan. Looked very, very dynamic, and a bit of a relief that we were seeing action, and that there was something very positive to see in front of us and to support. I understand that this is going to come to Cabinet now. The next step is that it comes to Cabinet. Do you feel that actually that this should go to Council for full debate first before it goes to Cabinet? I'm just thinking about the scale of what we're talking about here, about climate change. When COVID hit, you and I and a couple of other people in the room were in the Outbreak Control Board. It was a very serious issue, and we should be taking it as seriously as that. So, is there a member for full? Is there an area for full member cooperation in this space?
Yes, of course. There's always full member cooperation in this. My understanding that it's going to the groups at the moment. My briefing was that
It's been
as it been to all groups, and then once it goes through the group, right, yeah, then it will go through its full course. But what I'll do is I'll check exactly what the details are. But I think what you said is quite reasonable. But let me check exactly what's happening with that. You can make a note of that, and so don't forget. Yeah. Okay. So, Councillor Cooper.
So with the climate change action plan coming up, I think one of the things that we really ought to be looking at is fuel poverty as an integral part of that. And I'm wondering if there is going to be a comms strategy that's going to come from the council to, as we head into winter, to address some of the issues that are coming up. Because there's things like simple energy advice that we can offer, which can enable people to make savings. Things like how people can use the controls. Simple advice about sharing heat between neighbours. There was the whole issue about warm banks and things like that. It sounds to me like we really do need a strategy to address and deal with that. And I don't feel that the wider group of elected members are being involved in that, or it's something that's going to happen to us. Are we going to be involved?
Councillor Davis, can I ask you to provide a response, please?
Absolutely. Thanks, Councillor Cooper. Yeah, absolutely agree. A key issue. You know, if you look at two things that stand out, we know are going to impact people very much so in the cost of living crisis is affordable food and obviously heating and lighting, energy in general. Yeah, it is part of the overall comms strategy that's been put together for the cost of living approach that we take in through our online comms, through the booklet we produced and ongoing information. That continues to be developed. And I had a discussion with Julian Hobson, who heads up Welfare and Exchequer, only this week, talking about some of the things that perhaps we can do, which would be very pragmatic in terms of helping people. Things that we did actually during COVID, around, one of the initiatives during COVID that was done was to start providing people with slow cookers because, obviously they use much less energy, much easier to cook food, etc. Also, we're looking at, whether there's an opportunity to do something around sockets which control standby or knock off standby equipment, etc. So, well, I'm using those as examples. I'm not necessarily saying that's what we'll do, but we're exploring all sorts of things from the small practical and pragmatic issues to the overall comms suggestions as well. And I'd be more than happy to have a discussion with anybody from across any of the parties about thoughts and ideas. And if you want to set something up, we can do that. At this stage, we've not, to be fair, I'm not sure if we would set up sort of a significant meeting and invite lots of people, but I'm very happy to have those discussions either in a smaller group or individually. So please just contact me.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Councillor Scott, do you want to respond?
Yeah, just something to add in. I had the opportunity to see the Joannas, the green composting bins, and I think that, contributory to every household, there is things that we can be doing. And I'm bringing this forward and talking about it now is because about the food waste that we have and the Environmental Act. There was a date set for 2023 that we were looking at compliance, and it's now been pushed back to 2024-25. So these are all different things that we can all contribute together as a community and place-based things. So I just think there's a massive opportunity out there for us to be part of something. Looking at our general waste, because they are things that will all tie into the green agenda.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper, you want to come back?
Yeah, composting is important. But my question was really about fuel poverty and about how we address it, how we relate that to the cost of living crisis. And what I'd really like to, I know some councils who actually have cost of living working groups when they bring elected members and officers together to work on action plans to address the cost of living crisis. I'm not really aware of something like that here as such. Not anything that elected members, and there's not a lot of visibility to that, and the crisis is coming. We need a lot of brains and ideas looking at it. Now, maybe things are happening, but I'm not that aware of what's going on.
Yep, sure. I'm quite surprised because there's certainly been regular bulletins going out to councillors and regular updates. And on occasions like this, obviously I've given updates as well. So, if there are certain areas that you've missed and other people have missed, then happy to fill those gaps in. But I do think that we are actually doing our very best to make sure that we're keeping members up to date in particular. It's true, as I said earlier on, that we've not set up any cross-party working groups, and at this stage we weren't planning to do anything specifically around that, because I've been working very closely with the officers who are doing a very good job on this at the moment, and also I've been spending time talking to our trade union reps. Had a meeting with our trade union representatives only last week on the cost of living crisis, myself and Deborah Lucas, and they're very happy to feed ideas into us, which they're doing now as well. So there's a whole range of things, but as I said, I'd be more than happy if members, individual members, want to have a face-to-face meeting with me to go through issues, or if there's a small group that want to do that. What I don't want to do at this stage is set up a whole process with lots of meetings, when actually it's more about getting things done, and we're actually doing that at the moment. There's a lot of work going on. But please, Andrew, if you want to have a chat, outside this meeting, I want to sit down and go through some of the things, and I'd welcome any ideas and thoughts. As an example, at the moment, in terms of some of the leeway we've got, you'll recall that we talked about the 650,000 that we'd kept in terms of providing support outside of the rebate system. And we've already provided 250,000 of that to the third sector, but that means we do have 400,000 within our LWP budget, and that we're obviously looking at to maximise the impact of that as much as possible. But the trade unions come up with some really interesting ideas about what we could do in terms of employees as well. So yeah, please, by all means, give me a shout, and happy to have a chat about this outside the meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Paul Davies. I think Councillor Cooper's got another question.
Yeah, I'll just I won't go on about this, but I could throw a few ideas to Councillor Davies. I certainly could. But actually, what we need is a product at the end of this, which people have ownership of. And that's where not just councillors, but a lot of the organisations that come together around the cost of living crisis, who are bringing in their ideas about how they can come together to address the cost of living crisis, where we have an action plan that comes out of it which has got broader ownership. And it's not really about having a one-to-one conversation. That's very inefficient in lots of ways. We actually want to get people together and have a broad ownership of dealing with the cost of living crisis. If it's really about, well, we're in charge and that's it, and you can talk to me if you want, well, that's not really what I'm looking for.
I think just final comments, I guess. Certainly I don't want to give an impression that we're working in isolation at all. We're working very closely with the third sector within Kirklees and various partners. In fact, we have very strong relationships with those people and those bodies that are out there delivering on the ground and making a difference. So I certainly don't believe that what we do in any shape or form is in isolation. In fact, it's very action-driven and very pragmatic. And I think that's our emphasis at the moment. I don't think it's a case of us saying that we're in charge at all. I think it's us moving forward with the plans that we have in place, that we've already communicated, and that we continue to develop.
Thank you, Councillor Paul Davies. And any more questions? Councillor Warner? Leslie?
Yeah, thank you. There's a couple of questions. One is a real simple question, short. I'm on a sort of mission to, as you know, I've contacted you about the disabled access in Spa Park. But we're going ahead with stage one because we've got some money from the ward budget. But I've been shocked to discover last week that the path we are going to be fixing is Highways' responsibility. So we're already using money that Highways should do to repair this job and make the park accessible to wheelchairs. But I now find that we're expected to pay the £960 odd for the closure of the footpath, because Highway say they don't have a budget, it's not in their brief to do that. And so I'm questioning that. It's a fairly straightforward thing, but I would like to have, if that could be looked into, basically.
Yeah, I'm sure when he's back, he'll look into it. But the way the ward budgets work is we're all in that same situation where we want to do all the work, and we go to our officers regarding whatever we want to do. There's loads of stuff that I want to do in my area. And one way we do it is through the devolved monies that we get given. And that's something that, we've all approved at council. But what I'll do is ask Naheed to look into detail, but it sounds like you are getting it done, but from your money that's been devolved.
We've got a small amount of money in ward budgets, as you know, and given that we are doing the job, the ward budget is doing a job that repairing a route that highways are responsible for, we're going to be giving the money to do the work, but we thought the very least that highways could provide the money for is the closure of the footpath. We weren't even expecting to pay for that. So that's all I'm raising as an issue, because, everything is tight for everybody. We know that. And we'd heard that highways were going to pay for that closure, and it turns out they're not. So I wanted to raise it. I don't want to make a big deal. I just wanted to raise it at this level.
Yeah. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, Leslie, because I had a similar one in my ward, and it cost X amount to do a TRO, but that's part of the process. So what you're saying is exactly what we've agreed in the budget, and you're not the only one. But I will have a chat with Naheed and see if there's any other way we can get around it. But that's how the devolved money works in terms of the parameters we're working within. I've got Councillor Cooper with his hands up.
Sorry to labour the point, but does a cost of living crisis action plan exist for the council?
We have a number of actions that we've got in place, and I've asked them to be tracked. So yes, there is an action plan with actions that are being processed at the moment, and with further areas that are being investigated. In addition to that, there's a clear plan in terms of the comms, the strategy that we're using in terms of getting out to help people. Yes, there is documentation which shows what we're doing, how we're moving it forward, and the various areas that we are looking to deliver. Those are the areas predominantly I've already reported on. I think you've got to remember something as well, and I think, I will labour this point actually, because I think it's a point that needs to be laboured, and I'm sure Councillor Cooper, you understand this as well. We have limited opportunities and resources with regards to what we can do, and we clearly can't mitigate all the impact of the cost of living crisis. And I think we've, I'm stating the obvious, but it does need to be stated, just to make sure people are very clear on this. So in terms of the 3.7 million that we have in the Household Support Fund, clearly we're doing our best to distribute this in the best possible way and to get the most out of that we can. In addition, each of the directorates, have already been asked for their thoughts and ideas around cost of living, both from an internal perspective and externally. As I told you, I've already talked to the trade unions, and they're already engaging with us in terms of coming up with their ideas. So these are being documented and being pulled together. We have a team that's driving certainly the action on the ground, and that's Julian Hobson's team, and they're actually implementing those actions, as we talk now. So yes, if in that case, is it something that we've created a 70-page plan on? No, we're more interested, to be blunt, in putting together clear actions that we deliver. So hopefully that helps. And as I said, I'm more than happy to go through those details and go through what we're doing, either through email exchange or Teams meetings or face-to-face. Either way, quite happy.
Councillor Cooper,
so as it exists, because you said it exists, you could email it to me tomorrow.
I'll just make a slight comment. I think Councillor Cooper seems to be more interested in trying to work out whether he can catch out members of the Cabinet than actually do something about the cost of living crisis. So I'll focus much more on what we're doing on the cost of living crisis. I will forward you information which is relevant to that, Councillor Cooper, and would appreciate and be very happy to hear from you any comments or any thoughts you have on that.
Okay, thank you. You got another question?
Yeah, it was a genuine question. I am interested. I want to say because I've seen the Sheffield City Council action plan, which is quite a detailed action plan, and it's got a lot of buy-in from the community and voluntary sector, third sector. It's not just a council plan, and I know that the community and voluntary sector have come together themselves at an event on the 20th of July, where they were coming together to look at what they could do. So it was a genuine question, and I'm more than happy to share Sheffield's plan with Councillor Davies.
That would be good. I'm sure we'll be happy to see. Muz, do you want to?
Yeah, I just want to say councillors play a crucial role in their role as ward councillors to tackle the cost of living crisis. For example, we've been doing a tackling poverty and reducing food waste projects for years anyway, and all we've done is step those up. And I'm aware of the meeting that Councillor Cooper's referring to. I attended that, and that was about sharing practice. But I think we've got to remember, and one of the key lessons learnt from the pandemic was that not one size fits all solution is appropriate for every community. I mean, so we've got to take it from the ground up as to what different communities need, and councillors are key leaders within that, and I'm happy to share practice of what we've done in Dalton.
Thank you. Any more questions? Councillor Warner?
Yes, sorry, just one more. I mean, obviously people know I've had a few months out, and there were some sort of quite major changes made in the way that funding is being allocated in terms of the place partnership has now become the PCNs, which I have to say, as someone involved with the hospitals, calling them the PCNs, I think, well, I found it a bit confusing to begin with. One of the things that sort of dismays me a bit is when we do this keep swapping around, because in Colne Valley we had the most brilliant scheme for supporting young people's mental health. It was so good, I even flagged it up with Jackie Gedman as well at one point, that rather than, I mean, councillors chose what they did with the money, but we spent a lot of time. We didn't just give it to schools where there's no transparency in how it was spent. We didn't just give it to one company. We ended up funding, well, putting it out to tender and recruiting this company called, well, Place Partnership, which was two former teachers. One was a Senka, one was the head teacher. And the amazing thing they did was they guaranteed if a school referred a young person for mental health support, they would see them within 3 days. And that is what they did. 144 families were helped. And then suddenly we find that that is having to go. Now, I know we're going to work around trying to continue a form of that. But I just thought there was an opportunity, which I mentioned to Jackie once, so that this was such a brilliant flagship approach to mental health that I thought Kirklees could have rolled it out. Really, it could have gone on national with it, because there isn't a place in the country that's having problems dealing with young people's mental health, and it's on the growth. So I think my key question on this is that are these new PCN representatives going to have a pot of money that's going to be the equivalent of the money we had in Place Partnership, so that we can support, our priority certainly in our ward was young people's mental health. And we know we've only touched the tip of the iceberg. We know the CAMS waiting list is 2 years, etc., etc. So I feel quite strongly that, we don't want to lose the good stuff.
Okay, yeah, thank you. And I think you hit a really good point. Structures change. One of the reasons why we changed the structure from the previous one to the new primary care network footprint is because, I'm sure you know, as of July, we had a new national system that's been implemented across the country. Ours is the West Yorkshire ICS, Integrated Care System, and based on that, the rationale is that resources will be diverted through that and then lined up at a local level, and primary care networks will be the areas where we can link into. So, and I think you've touched on it already, that good work that's taken place in the Corn Valley will not be lost. That will continue. This is one way of aligning the resources of the NHS to the resources of the council. Having said that, we know that mental health services has always been underfunded, and on the back of the pandemic, the evidence is growing that there's actually a major crisis in mental health, bigger than the pandemic, before the pandemic, and hopefully this way we'll actually get it more aligned to actually what we're trying to do under the new structures. So I hope that gives you some assurances, but this is all about making sure that we actually transform and get things aligned as a council to the primary care network footprint.
I think the only problem with that is that you're not necessarily working. I mean, the primary care networks and the health service are more sort of on a more business model. So we are no longer working with the local wards we were working with before, and that was a relationship that worked really well. And it's just, it just feels a bit like something that was really good and worked well has been changed to fit in with what in effect is the business model of the way the NHS is now run. And, it worries me that, more and more is going over to the business sector, and, we know what happens then.
Yeah, I don't want to start getting ins and outs of the NHS and, is it getting defunded and is it getting disinvested and all the rest of it, but I take your point. Councillor Lawson?
Thank you, Leader. Brief question. Do we have a clear idea of how much money was diverted from Kirklees to Tunbridge Wells when Rishi Sunak was diverting money from poorer authorities to the authorities that really did deserve it?
That's an excellent question. I'm sure people who are watching and cabinet members will be aware that during the recent hustings meetings that are taking place up and down the country, Rishi Sunak was on the record of saying that he has made sure, and he's still trying to make sure, that the funding that went into deprived and areas where there's severe poverty, he's trying to get that money diverted to areas where poverty and deprivation isn't to the same extent. And this really smacks into the teeth of the levelling up agenda, because the levelling up agenda is all about making sure that areas where there's severe deprivation and poverty is targeted and actually bring people out of poverty. And the question that Councillor Lawson asked is excellent in terms of the money that was diverted to Tunbridge Wells, where arguably the poverty levels aren't as dire as some of the parts of the country and indeed some part of Kirklees. I don't know exact figure, but looking at the last round of bids that were submitted to government, and again, I'm just going off my memory, but the amount of money that went into Devon was a lot more than the amount of money that went into some northern councils across the country, where there are big urban settlements with big populations of high density, deprived and poor communities. And there's a lot of data around it, but I just can't pluck them off the top of my head. But I think the key thing is, right, and the questions are right, that if that is what the government is doing and have been doing in terms of diverting the money from deprived areas and urban areas into more shy councils where there isn't as much as deprivation, then A, how much has been diverted, but B, if it's been diverted, fair enough, but when we will get the money that we were deserved in more poverty-stricken areas? And that is a question that I'm sure many MPs are asking. I already know that on a cross-party basis, MPs are asking that question, and we will keep on pursuing that through our MPs. Have we got supplementary, Councillor Lawson?
Just a brief one. Will you follow that up in your meetings with LGA colleagues, and please report back? Thank you.
I will, and I will report back. What I report back and how much information I get, that's a different question, but I will definitely do that for you. Thanks, Councillor Lawson. Brings us nicely onto the next part of the agenda. We've done our members' question time. Item 8 is the financial outturn report for 2021-22 to include revenue, capital and housing revenue account, outturn position and annual report on treasury management. Councillor Davis.
Yep, thank you, Leader. As I said, this is the annual report which we present to Cabinet. It will go on to full council as well, and it's concerning the annual financial performance of the council for financial year 21-22. The report includes information on the overall general revenue outturn position, and the good news, I think as we already know, is we've pretty much achieved the break-even position against a net revenue budget of 327 million. We're getting some feedback. Don't know, let me just, it's not now, is it? No? Do you want me to carry on? Yeah, okay, yeah, sorry. Okay, the outturn position includes the additional COVID spend in year of 37 million, along with the offset in government COVID funding, and there was a planned drawdown of 21 million COVID funding rolled forward through reserves from 2020 to 21 and then 21 to 22. Elsewhere, there were some in-year pressures on service income losses. These were in excess of 4 million, but again, there was a compensating government COVID grant offset and a release of some contingency in provision in central budgets. The report also notes an overall planned net drawdown of 30 million from general fund reserves in year. And this again was largely related to COVID funding rolled forward from 2020 to 21, as noted earlier. Total general fund reserves at year end were 167 million. In terms of the collection fund, in-year position overall was some 5.4 million in deficit, and an overall accumulated deficit at year end of 40 million. This, though, was largely a timing issue due to various grants, etc., not hitting our books at that time, and some of these will now be applied in 2022-23 against this deficit roll forward. The report also refers to something that I've raised previously, which was some excellent work that our finance team and children's team did in terms of the government safety valve dedicated schools grant deficit reduction programme. Really snappy title. This was, as you remember, the fact that we had within Kirklees an accumulated deficit position on high needs of 35 million in 21-22, and without a successful conclusion to these discussions, that obviously would have increased over time and really would have been even more significant in the future. So what we've now have is we've received upfront government funding of 13.5 million at the end of March, which brings our deficit down to 22 million, and a further 20 million will be released over 5 years. However, we will have to deliver planned in-year savings and transformation targets during that period. Housing revenue account reported a deficit of 3.5 million. This was largely due to the essential revenue compliance work on council housing stock. Capital spend overall was 128 million, an increase of 35 million compared to the previous year, and indicates a scaling up of capital investment overall. The revised capital budget was 157 million, an overall underspend of 29. And the underlying slippage at year end before the year end one-off capitalisation exercise was 33.7 million, and the report recommends rolling this capital over from 2021-22 into 22-23 financial year. The report also references annual performance review and treasury management for 21-22, and this was reported to Corporate Governance and Audit Committee on the 17th of June for information. Something that we've already referred to earlier on in terms of cost of living pressures, the report does refer to this, but we'll be covering this in much more detail in the next but one item in terms of Q1 financial monitoring report. So that brings us to the officer's recommendations, section 7, most of which are simply to note, but I'll just pick out those that need our approval as a cabinet. So 7.4 is about asking us to approve the drawdown from the council's earmarked demand reserve to offset the Almonbury Community School deficit school balance, and that was a write-down of just under 2 million. To write that down to the Council's General Fund in 21-22 in line with DSG guidance. 7.6 to reaffirm the proposed use of pre-existing reserves and endorse the proposed use of new reserves as set out in section 1.9. And then when we come to capital, to approve the 33.7 capital rollover from 21-22 to the current year, 22-23, approve the revised capital plan for the period 2022 to 23 after taking into account the rollover. 7.13 to approve retrospectively the transfer of 1.2 million to Spen Valley Leisure Centre from the capital plan, and that's to meet contractually bound payments. And then finally 7.14 is to approve an additional 350,000 borrowing for the George Hotel in terms of the successful completion of phase 1. And I would put that to Cabinet for approval and for the others items to be noted, Leader. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to second that. We all okay? Thank you very much. Item 9, end of year corporate performance impact report. Councillor Davies.
Got logged up. Thank you. This will be slightly shorter. I think in summary, this report is, as it's laid out, is about the progress we made on deliverables regarding the council plan. These contribute to our overall shared outcomes and provides within there quite significant detail as well as the headline indicators that we see at the beginning of the report. The style of the report is very much to give that, if you like, executive headline achievements and challenges at the front end with the detail of the various objectives and outcomes as you go through the report. So with regards to this, the next steps and timelines is that the next corporate performance and impact report will be produced mid-year. So that's 2022-23. And there we'll have an update on priority actions and deliverables in the Council Plan 21-23. Unless there's any other questions or anything somebody wants to pick up, I'm simply asking Cabinet to note this at this point.
I'd like to second that. Are we okay to move that report? Quick hands up. Thank you very much, members. Item 10, Corporate Financial Performance Monitoring Report, Q1 for 2022-23.
So this obviously is in many respects much more relevant and much more important for us. And we talked about the outturn from our last financial year, and obviously it's key that we balanced last year's budget with all the challenges we faced. But we've already during this meeting been talking about some of the pressures in terms of the cost of living crisis. And this, as I go through this, you will see the impact this is making on our finances. So our Corporate Scrutiny Panel on the 5th of July received an early heads-up report on these emerging impacts on a range of significant cost of living pressures. And I think we're all pretty well versed in the sources of that in terms of obviously the conflict in Ukraine and the various pressures that's brought within Europe and even globally. These pressures couldn't have been predicted when we looked at budget and we signed off budget plans for 2022-23. And again, as I've stated in others, this is a much broader issue than just Kirklees. This is an issue that's hitting all local authorities, and clearly the LGA are lobbying very hard into government seeking additional funding and support. Unfortunately, at this stage, there seems to be no early indication that government will support the in-year cost of living pressures, across any part of the public sector. And, worryingly, when we look at the current campaign that's going on in terms of the Conservative leadership, it does seem to be that the indications are that, if anything, there could be further constraints on the public sector rather than further help. With that in mind, obviously, we have to approach this in terms of what we can do within the limitations we have. So the scrutiny report highlighted impacts on residents, households and businesses, and the extent of the national and council and partner hardship support available. And it also noted a range of potential impacts on the council finances. So now the Q1 financial monitoring report includes an initial view of the extent of the unbudgeted cost of living impacts on council finances. And this is currently estimated at £20 million. Now, this unfortunately is something which is not stable and is moving, but certainly at this stage, that's our best estimate. Plus, there's other in-service pressures of around 4.6 million. So that brings us to a total of 24.6 million against a revised general fund net revenue budget of 336. So that's an equivalent to a 7.3 variance. So it's a 24.6 forecasted deficit at this stage. The single most significant impact relates to energy costs. This is in excess of all of our budgeted assumptions. Despite us looking at what we thought were potential increases, this has now risen to over £13 million. So it's a combination of the unprecedented gas price volatility at 415% and 118% electricity prices above budgeted assumptions. In addition, we've looked at our pay award forecast for 22-23 and initially budgeted for 2% last year, as was recommended, and now have looked at least a 5% budget needed relevant to those assumptions earlier on. With a 5%, if that is the figure, that will put another 4.4 million pressure on our budgets. But it has to be said that at the moment, with the current offer from employers, which is just under £2,000 flat sum, the likelihood is that that will increase for us because as a council, unlike other councils, we've really not outsourced that much, and therefore we have a higher percentage of our staff at the lower end of pay scales. So it is pretty much certain that that number will increase. That's being worked on at the moment, so I haven't got a figure on that at this stage. In addition to that, there's also inflation pressures around fuel and food, and that amounts to 2 million in total across transport and catering. I mentioned, I think earlier on, the 4.6 in-service pressures within directorates. These include further school transport pressures at 2.4 million. And, in a normal year, these would be looked at as challenges that we would face up to and take actions, but clearly when you add this to the cost of living pressures, that adds a very different scale to the challenge. Fortunately, at the moment, there is no reported in-year variance on collection fund, but we're closely monitoring this, and clearly as things, as conditions deteriorate for households with the cost of living crisis, this is an area that could well be affected. The report also notes HRA is currently forecast to overspend by around 300,000, which is very modest against a budget of 95 million. And to date, we spent 23 million against the overall 22-23 capital plan. And there is certainly reference in the report to the work that we're doing to have a rigorous review of our multi-year plans going forward. And the MTFS refresh to Council in September will add more detail to that. There are some specific recommendations, one for the £200,000 drawdown against the headline capital allocation for the heat network scheme, which is clearly a very good investment. This is for the feasibility work, and also £1 million from the Cultural Heart programme to continue work to stage 2, Gateway 2. General fund reserves are anticipated to reduce by 30 million in 22-23. So that'll take us from 167 million to 107. And within that, there are a number of planned drawdowns in year. So we're looking to set aside up to 10 million at the moment, £1 million, earmarked reserves to help offset cost of living pressures within year. And also the balance of the 24.6 or the 14.6 as an unplanned drawdown if we're not able to meet the challenges that we hope we can meet within the directorates and other actions. I think a comment just on reserves. I think members will remember that we were having discussions not that long ago where as an administration we were being told that we were holding on to far too much within our reserves, and that we should be spending them and improving the lives of our citizens, and that we were really just, if you like, hiding away money from the taxpayers. I think we can see now that we were acting in a very prudent, measured and sensible fashion. But I will emphasise, once reserves go, they go. And we cannot obviously sustain this forever and a day. And that therefore emphasises the need for further government support. I think there's no doubt whatsoever that'll be the same position for all other local authorities. So, with that, I will ask if I can get that. So, in terms of the recommendations, section 7, a number of recommendations in there that seeking approval, and I would ask Cabinet to refer to that and to note and approve the appropriate sections. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Davis. I'd like to second that. But before I do, just to give you some context, our first quarter performance into the financial monitoring, the biggest element there is something that's beyond our control, energy. And just to give you some context, BP made £6.9 billion profit in their first quarter. 6.9 billion. That's 250 million pounds a week, half a billion, sorry, £1,000 million, right? Yeah, each month. So it just goes to show that while we are trying to provide a public service to our residents, the utilities, in this case BP, have made £6.9 billion. And the point I'm making is, right, the government can very easily put a levy on these big companies because they're making excessive profits. And we're trying to make ends meet. We're trying to make sure that we support our residents. And this is something that I wish John was here, because his question was quite right in terms of what this council is doing. But this council is doing everything we can, but we are actually also suffering the cost of living crisis. So if we haven't got the money, if we're actually spending more money than planned, way beyond our plans, our job is going to be made more harder. That's why we do need government to actually set that emergency budget. Otherwise, it's going to hurt a lot of people. Many millions more people are going to go into poverty. So on that note, I'd just like to support that, and unless anybody else wants to make any more comments, but I think it's important to recognise that energy companies are making billions, while the working class are actually making ends meet and going to slip into more poverty. Okay, members, quick show of hands. Thank you very much. Next item, Councillor Muscan, Kirklees Joint Health and Wellbeing Strategy. Refresh.
Thank you, Leader. This report seeking endorsement of the draft Refresh Joint Health Wellbeing Strategy. This will enable the draft strategy to progress along the proposed timeline to seek endorsement of full council, prior to the final version being presented at the September Health and Wellbeing Board meeting for final approval. The Council and NHS partners have a statutory duty to agree, publish and implement a joint health and wellbeing strategy for the district. The strategy sets out the vision, ways of working and priorities for health and wellbeing Kirklees. Responsibility for delivery of the strategy rests across a wide range of local partner organisations with oversight by the Kirklees Health and Wellbeing Board. We will develop a set of materials to help communicate the joint health wellbeing strategy and recognise that further minor amendments may be necessary to take account of feedback from Cabinet and other key partners. The strategy is being produced following a process of engagement with the public, partners, political groups, senior leaderships, scrutiny and the Health and Wellbeing Board. This has enabled us to identify how we should approach improving health and wellbeing and the priorities, along with the factors that make a difference to our health and wellbeing, both positively and negatively, from what people who live, work and study in Kirklees have told us.
I'd like to second that. Are we all okay? Put hands up. Thank you, members. Thank you, Councillor Khan, for moving that. Item 12. Before we go to item 12, I'm assuming that we've all read item 14, which is the private and confidential report to this report. Yes? Okay, so basically, now he's not here, so I will try and just do this some justice. This is basically replacing a data management system within the highway service.
Just 1 second, sorry. Is it possible just to ask, just ask a question, or rather, needing some reassurance about what's just been said to do with the mental
Yes, but my apologies, Councillor Warner. I did not see your hands go. But, did we know that Councillor Warner was going to speak? Yeah, so no problem. See with the issue, Leslie. I will let you talk forever. Over to you.
Oh, well, you were here till 6 o'clock. No. It's just, obviously, as a member of the Adult Health Social Scrutiny, and we were at that first scrutiny meeting where all the new changes are being put in place. And obviously, it's a phenomenal challenge, everybody knows that, with not enough funding and personally concerns about some of our partners. You know, maybe I won't mention which one, but there's certainly one that worries me. But the thing that concerns me most, and particularly in the light of how the Place Partnership was delivering the mental health, is the need to ensure scrutiny on the mental health in schools. The new proposal where it's going to be delivered in each school, there are lots of issues around who, training, resources, because as an ex-teacher, I know only too well if some money's coming in for mental health, there are many strategies for doing tick boxes. Oh, we'll have an assembly, tick. We'll ask a teaching assistant who has been sent a day on, you know, dealing with kids with special needs training to do the counselling. And the initial feedback from a couple of the schools in Colne Valley has been concerned that the quality may not be anything like what we were offering before. So, I mean, I've asked on scrutiny that this is going to be looked at and how that mental health in schools, as it rolls out, I just need to ensure that there's no tick boxes going on, that it actually is effective, that these are trained counsellors and that the young people are going to get the help they need.
Councillor Hannah, are you able to answer that?
Yeah, sure. You'll notice that in this document, one of the key things is about the way we deliver stuff. That's absolutely crucial in terms of getting the outcome. So it's not just a tick box exercise of, oh, look, we've addressed mental health. So I can reassure you on that front. Now, the responsibility of implementing this strategy is the Health and Wellbeing Board's once it's approved. So you do really well in your scrutiny role, and you're always welcome to come along to the Health and Wellbeing Board and air any concerns or anything that needs ironing out. Okay.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Are you okay with that? Thank you very much. Right, okay, item 12. I was saying that Councillor Naheed Mather is not here, and in her absence, I will try and do some justice to this report. But before we do that, the private item, and we've just clarified that we've all read that private item. So the report basically is about replacing the asset management database system, and I'd like to move the officer's recommendations as of 6.1 and 6.2 of this report. And he's gave her recommendations as well. And also Councillor Bill Simpson and Councillor Paul Davis. So Paul knows all about this, right? Yeah. So Paul, can I ask you to second the report? And if you want to say a few words, you can do.
Well, thanks, Leader. Yeah, absolutely. I think this, although quite a significant expenditure, certainly is vital that we put this in place. You've seen from the report, the sort of rationale and the background to this. In terms of our teams working on this, they've certainly done a very good job with regards to pulling this together, and certainly has my backing. And as he said, the other portfolio holders involved certainly as well are happy with this. So I have no problem in supporting this.
Thank you very much. Members, can we have a quick show of hands? We approve it. Thank you. That is the end of today's meeting. Thank you very much for taking part, and thank you all for watching, those of you who are watching at home. Good night or good evening, and hope to see you again soon.